Chewels writes in and says Beyond.
Beyond.
I was just wondering, why does the Xbox One and PS4 get a pass when they re-release games like Tomb Raider and The Last of Us and The Walking Dead, but the Wii U gets crucified when it did the same with Mass Effect 3 and Arkham City? Thank you for your time.
I think the better example of the crucifixion was Wind Waker, not those two games. But
Really? The people didn't like Wind Waker coming out?
no, people would give it shit. It's like it's not even a real Zelda. I agree.
Fuck that,
Those
man.
people
Wind
need to
Waker's
die.
awesome. Wind Waker's
Oh,
that was
I love
hard.
Those people need to die in a fire.
This man used to be a reverend.
Okay, die in a fire if you hate on Wind Waker.
I love Wind Waker too.
Yeah.
Wind Waker's an amazing game. Don't talk
And I've
shit about
always
it.
said that, and I hate this. I've said this before. This fucking revisionist history about this game is unbelievable.
But it
I've never
feels
seen
like-
anything like it. Everyone hated that game when it came out. Zelda was what everyone called it. CELDA everywhere for years. Everyone hated it. Now suddenly, and I loved it. I was like, Wind Waker's awesome. It's like one of my favorite Zelda games.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, blah, blah, blah. Now suddenly, out of nowhere, 10 years later, everyone loves Wind Waker. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I remember, sir. I remember.
I fought in the foxhole, sir.
I remember the GameFAQs message boards about that game. I remember all that stuff. The revisionist history is wild about that game.
I held viewing parties in my dorm room, so it was loved on the University of Missouri campus. I'll have you know. So yeah, this is an interesting question, right? Like we do get excited that oh man, Last of Us is coming. Oh man, for me, I guess it's the fact that Mass Effect 3 and Batman Arkham City were touted as like day one releases for the Wii U as this awesome thing, and they didn't have any other games really to back it up, right? Like if that makes sense. Like they're like Infamous and Titanfall, and like granted those were after the fact, but they were close enough that you were like, that's awesome. This is why I'm buying it. Whereas with Wii U, it was like I'm buying it for Zombie U and the Mario. You know what I mean? Like there was this like
I've got
disconnect.
an alternate theory
Please.
that's close to that, but I think that some of it comes from the fact that Nintendo, especially of all companies, because of their long legacy and the way they design games, is accused of being derivative. I mean, Mario games are still Mario games, and they have been since 1985. They are better and better, or at least they are very good and solid. But Nintendo, in particular, recycles ideas and innovates on them.
Yeah.
That is their thing. They do that more than Sony does in most cases. They do that more broadly than Microsoft does. They do that more broadly than almost any other developer. And I think by extension, their third-party games get stuck with that because they're appearing on Nintendo platforms. I really think that's where the mentality comes from, and that's why the Wii U remakes take so much more crap, even though they're third-party, because people are associating it with Nintendo's tendency to go back to their first-party ideas and create games that are similar to ones that have come before. I really think that's where it
The
comes
big
from.
thing too is like Nintendo's never known for its third-party support. You buy a Nintendo system for the exclusives, and so then for them to come out, and I remember the Wii U was next gen. It was the next step for video games. It was more powerful than PS3 and Xbox 360. So to come out and be like, this is the version of Batman Arkham City, which is old, that you need to buy. This is the version of Mass Effect 3, which is old, you need to buy. That was the other thing that I think that didn't fit right. Like for, Last of Us Remastered, it's like, here's this awesome game that you didn't buy back then. They're not making it, at least not yet, and probably not, knowing how Sony markets, not banging the drum of like, man, this is the best thing ever, and you've never seen it before. You've never played it. This, you know what I mean? Like this, people know Last of Us. Here's this great game, go play it. Whereas this was a bigger deal.
And I've been a pretty, personally been a pretty vocal critic of the re-releases. It was fun for a little while, like we've always said, God of War collection, Sly collection, and then it just got out of control. Like everyone was doing it just because we kind of got what we asked for. It's like just re-release it with trophies.
Yeah.
And then they did it. But I've been a critic of that too on PS4. A lot of these games are available multi-platform. A lot of these games are older. I didn't play Tomb Raider and all that kind of stuff on PS4 because I don't care. And I agree that The Last of Us is exciting on PS4, but it's not what's needed. It's actually probably going to sell PS4s because that is one game that people would buy PS3s for, and probably why they didn't want to announce it yet.
Right.
Because they can still sell these units.
And I guess that's a big part of it too, right? Is like Last of Us Remastered is a system seller because Sony knows you didn't buy a PS3. A lot of people didn't buy PS3s. A lot of people didn't play these games. So now you have this PS4. We have this install base. We're giving it to you. Whereas Wii U is like, we know a lot of you owned 360s and PS3s and had a chance to play Mass Effect and had this, but here it is again. If that makes sense. There's not an original experience from a third party.
It does make sense, and I think the one key metric that I think people ignore generally with Nintendo and the waning popularity of Nintendo, which is undeniable, is very simple. And this can be best shown in a graph, but you can just it can
If only we had the whiteboard.
If only we had a whiteboard here.
But
I am bringing you one next time I come on.
Ignore handhelds for a minute, right? Their handhelds are exorbitantly popular.
Mario Golf.
I mean, 3DS isn't as nearly as popular as DS, but it's very popular.
Yeah, but how can it be in this
8-1.
universe? I don't think that's Nintendo's fault. I think that's the fact that the world changed.
But there's this interesting thing that like people are surprised that Nintendo's waning in the console space, right? And just look at the numbers, right? And these are approximate numbers. NES 60 million, Super Nintendo 50 million, N64 30 million, GameCube 25 million, Wii 100 million, Wii U 6 million. You know what I mean? There's this like aberration during the Blue Ocean strategy that got the consoles out there, but the whole slant has always been down.
The slant in sales has been down, but the slant in profits hasn't been until there's one dip. That's a whole other chart.
And that's because I think a lot of the profits. GameCube was actually even profitable.
Oh yeah, they made tons of money on GameCube
because it's not a powerful system and it doesn't use proprietary proprietary technology that they have to source from everyone. A lot of them gave them shit for not even having DVD, but they would have had to pay $10 GameCube to have a DVD player in there. So these were smart, and also the handheld market: Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color. Game Boy Advance, and then into the DS, like that. Those lines are actually, it's if you count the Game Boys together, even the line goes up from like 100 to 150, and then down again to like 35. But like, I guess what I'm saying is, Nintendo hasn't been as popular in real terms in the console space as we've always assumed, and the Wii was the aberration that confused everyone because everyone acknowledged and knew this in the GameCube era,
right?
Yeah.
Like GameCube was my shit when I loved the GameCube. But it's only sold 25 million units.
Yeah.
Like it's not at all impressive, and that's only 5 million less than the N64 sold, which was destroyed by the PlayStation.
Well, the N64 was fundamentally flawed, but that's a whole other.
That's
discussion.
true, and SNES. A lot of people forget that SNES was getting beat for a long time, and the only reason that it won against Genesis was because of the late tail of a lot of games that came out for it.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2, Donkey Kong Country, things like that.
Like there was a lot of heavy JRPG support from Square Enix or Squaresoft at the time that kept the system relevant for a longer period of time than Genesis was. So they're fighting history, I guess is what I'm saying. Like the Wii was the blip. Like the unusual thing on the radar. Wii U is not going to be anything, and that sucks and that's sad for them, which is why they need to get, and I understand there's all these business and hardware realities. They need a beautiful Vita-like handheld, a powerful handheld that can talk to your TV, and that's like whether it's by a dongle or a wire or whatever, and that's their shit. If they made like a powerful Nintendo handheld that wasn't a tablet with single touch that looked like a toy. When everyone uses iPads.
That's the gamepad he's making.
Well, I mean,
it's true. Yeah, there are so many ways
to an iPad. It's like, okay. Like,
it didn't look as bad when it came out. They didn't give us anything to do with the darn thing. When they had a window, they blew it. There's 40 ways this discussion can go, but I absolutely agree. You've got a good point there. I don't know how a high-end piece of portable hardware that interfaces with your TV would do. It's an intriguing idea. I'd buy one.
I think it would do awesome. If it was just the DS, right, and not the DS, but I'm saying if it was just if you could get the quality experience that you get on your DS on that, and then put them like Mario Golf. How obsessed I am with Mario Golf. If I go play Mario Golf on the big screen. Fuck yeah, all right.
Yeah. But I think the thing did much worse than expected. You raised just so many good points there. I think that. Yeah, you had to think about Nintendo's an attach rate oriented company. Again, you talk about, you're always pointing out attach rate. People buy lots of games for it. With even the Wii U, there haven't been enough to do that with. But I want to go back for a second to what you said about collections like 5 minutes ago. I agree with you that there have been an oversaturation of collections, but I do disagree with you a little. I'm glad there are. Not because I'm going to buy them all necessarily, but because they give people that are a few years younger and didn't play those games a chance to play them.
History.
I am always a fan of preserving that history. So they rely on them too much from a marketing standpoint, but I'm really glad they exist because they're going to give kids that were 8 and are now 13 a chance to play games they would never have touched when they were 8.
So is that another reason you think that Wii U, in quotes from Chules here, is saying is getting crucified? The fact that does a Mass Effect 3 Batman Armored Edition really matter to the Wii U as much as...
Not as much as it does to Sony, no.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So yeah, good point. Really good point, Greg.
Yeah, Nintendo's just in a situation where they can't win, right? Like... we always talk about their waning third-party support, but the fact is that their third-party support was huge in the NES and SNES era, which we already know. In fact, it was so big in the NES era that they limited how many games people can publish on their system every year, 5.
Yeah.
And that's why Ultra came out, which was just a shell company and like all this kind of stuff.
But they
all
pulled that off
companies
because
with their names spelled
they
backwards.
had third parties by the cojones.
Yeah.
And the moment these folks could get away, they did. And for a long time, they did not forget that. I mean, Nintendo dug its own grave on that. They made money hand over fist, but they also alienated the people who could have kept them going through the next decade.
Read Game Over.
Yeah,
that's in there.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
Everyone's asked what that book about Nintendo was. Game Over. It's the best video game book ever.
Yep.
And they go into that about Nintendo's totally Byzantine fucking system for they had to buy cartridges from people. They can only Ultra. A lot of people don't know this. Konami was a company obviously back then. They're releasing Castlevania, Metal Gear, Contra. They created a shell company called Ultra, which was a publisher, just to release more games because they were not allowed to release more games under the Konami name.
5 a year.
Yeah. So that's when you saw Blades of Steel and stuff like that come out under Ultra. I think even Metal Gear actually came out under Ultra. Right?
Metal Gear was an Ultra game. Yeah.
So and the SNES era, people didn't forget about that. The cartridge expenses were huge. By the time you got to N64, where your cartridges were really expensive and you can put things on CD and do more. Remember the Final Fantasy VII ads that were basically make fun of N64, make fun of cartridges because you couldn't do this kind of stuff on the N64, even though the N64 was technically more powerful. It just was a different way of looking at things. And ever since then, except for GameCube had really early third-party support, but other than that.
But again, Nintendo didn't know what to do with it by that point. They'd been away from it for so long. Yeah, and oh goodness, we could talk about that. Can we talk about this for 2 hours? Because I would love to.
Go to NVC.
Okay,
just watch. Make Jose cry. Make Jose cry when he's like, "What?" No third party.
But